Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. In this episode, I am joined by my fellow coaches, Jeff Alberts and Alberto Nunez, and we're going to be discussing the art of coaching the physique athlete. Now, of course, we pride ourselves on applying science to our coaching practice, but we also like to emphasize the fact that we're dealing with humans with emotions, preferences, goals, hopes, dreams, other lives outside of the gym that need to be considered when we are working with our athletes. In this conversation, we'll talk about why we ask for videos from our athletes, what we expect in their weekly report so that we can do our job better. And we'll finish by touching on some ways that we think new coaches can learn these practices, nurture their abilities to work with people, and why we think that those tools are so important. So please enjoy this conversation with Jeff Alberts and Alberto Nunez on the art of coaching the physique athlete. Jeff and Berto, let's talk about the art of coaching as opposed to, not even as opposed to the science, but how people think that that's all that matters. And that's not 3D-ish, you know?
No.
I want to tell y'all what's the weirdest thing to me is that in every other sport, besides like bodybuilding, powerlifting, and like weightlifting and stuff, it seems like the art and the practice and the pedagogy as a science or whatever is super emphasized. But with us, everyone's like, nah, I just need to know my macros and like, that's it.
Yeah, especially with this generation, and they do supplement each other, and we kind of do this as a group, as people will see over time.
What do you mean?
We all have our strengths when it comes to coaching, and I think all of our bars are set a little bit higher when it comes to, I guess, all the things that, like, the 5 things that Eric mentioned that make a great coach. I forgot what article that was, but all our bars are kind of in different places. I think we're all like quite good at every one of them, but yeah, I think that's what makes us so awesome, is that we across the criteria, we're all pretty well balanced. I just said we're awesome, but we are.
You can say that. I feel like that.
It's our podcast. I can say that. Yeah. But I interrupted Jeff. I know Jeff is biting.
I was just gonna say that I think when I first started coaching, like when we first started out, we only had like the 2 sponsored athletes, and I wasn't coaching them directly. I was more of the admin to the team. So I was, you could say, kind of insecure about coaching people because I didn't want to mess people up. That was the biggest thing for me. So over the years, I've gained confidence, but that's just slowly kind of, building that up by taking on a little at a time as far as athletes. But I think as I've gone along, I've been wearing different hats, you could say. Like, the first year or 2, I was a lot more compassionate as a coach. Not that I'm not compassionate now towards athletes, but there was a lot of compassion. And I think sometimes that compassion kind of got in the way of my ability to nail the hammer down on some athletes when they needed it. So, getting to, the athletes to the stage, the goal is to get as shredded as possible. And I think by being too compassionate, it kind of probably hurt some of those athletes' conditioning. So now I've learned that, it's like an NFL coach. You got your Mike Dickas of the world that, sometimes they got to drop their hammer down when needed. And I've been doing a lot more of that, I would say, probably in the last 2 seasons. And I could definitely correlate the difference in conditioning with kind of the hat that I'm wearing. So it just depends on, the athlete and kind of where they're at in their preps. I have to know when to make these calls, what hat I have to wear at a specific given time. So that's kind of, some of the conversation, I think, as far as the art with me anyways.
Well, and the thing is, too, is like the fact that you even said I'm overly compassionate with some or for periods of time, and now you feel like you're able to lay the hammer down a bit more, but the skill that you've developed is knowing whether an athlete needs the hammer or needs the compassion. And
Exactly.
that's the shit of it. Like, that's the art part that I feel like, again, everyone's just like, but for real, like, how many grams of protein? And I'm like, what? Like, there's so much other stuff that matters.
Yeah, it's like sometimes I'm like I remember one time I dispersed like a 9-minute video, basically just kind of getting into this person. Hey, you need to get your shit together, and this needs to be done. You need to start executing and not complaining and making excuses. And after I sent the send button, I was like, I hope I don't get fired. Because basically I was not mean, but it was definitely deliberate. And thankfully, the person at that time, it was well received. So it was definitely the right judgment call. But I don't think I could have made that judgment when I first started. So I've been able to basically kind of learn, when to make those types of calls. If I wouldn't do that to a person who's maybe really over the top emotional, like an emotional type person, I'm not going to drop the hammer like that. That's when you kind of be a little bit more compassionate.
And that what's really cool that I think that plays into is that some people think that we ask for our clients to come approach us like super duper early, right? And then on one hand, yes, like you have a great video on it that we'll link somewhere in the notes for people who are watching this, but you have a great video on our channel about how long to allow for prep and all that stuff. And of course, we're longer than most. But the reason for that isn't always just the body. It's that you've developed a relationship with that person over the months. So then like you said, what type of person can handle that and one can't, or which people can handle that type of tough love and which ones it would crush them and then they'd quit. And that's something that people don't take into account necessarily when they're like, well, how long do I need? It's like not necessarily just how long does your body need, but also how long does it take us to establish that relationship to where I'm comfortable enough as a coach to tell you what you need to hear the way you need to hear it.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure Berto could relate to this as well.
Yeah.
No, being both parties, just having that coach-athlete relationship. And that's the main reason we started that Skype program, so that people, before they jump into their contest prep, we have a few interactions and they've gained trust in me and I've gained trust in them and we have a feel for each other. And that's super, super important. But yeah, like you guys mentioned, I think the coach being pliable is super, super important. And knowing when to maybe go this route or go that route. But like Jeff said, I think I get the same. There's probably the same rumor going around that Berto's a little soft with his athletes, but there's been a few times that I'm like, man, I just send that, see what happens, because this is what this person needs in order to be really happy with how their prep went. But agree.
I think for me, I get a lot of my coaching skill set from my parents. Basically, my mom is the softie. Like, she's the emotional one and very nurturing, and she basically babied me probably too much, and where my stepdad was total opposite. He was extremely hard on me and very difficult, and I had a lot of tough love growing up as a kid, and it didn't resonate with me until I was like in my mid to late 20s. I'm like, oh shit, all the stuff he was teaching me, it was definitely rough around the edges, but it all made sense as an adult. And I'm like, okay, so I think a combination of that has definitely helped me out. It's just now it's like I'm getting better at knowing when to apply the right approach with people and specific timing too. That's pretty important. Obviously in the beginning of a prep, if someone, let's say they're not adhering too well, maybe, you could be probably a little more lenient, be a little bit more supportive emotionally. But, as time goes on with the prep and you need to kind of buckle down, if they're still making those same mistakes, that's when you got to drop the hammer and say, all right, man, you got to start executing, like I call it GSD, get shit done. Otherwise, at the end of a prep, if you didn't do everything you should be doing, you're going to have nothing but regret at the end. You're going to be like, man, what if I would have been on point, would have changed things. I've experienced that with my own preps. At the end, I'm like, shit, I messed up. And it just haunts you for a whole off season. So,
Berto, was bodybuilding coaching the first time that you coached?
No,
because you taught, right?
So I did a few things, but to be quite honest, I think where the majority of my skill set comes in regards to, I guess, all those vague attributes that make a good coach is that just growing up, I was fortunate enough. It was a stress at the time, but looking back now, I was fortunate enough to be able to interact with just many different kinds of people. And even now, for example, with my personal friendships, there's a point in time where I stopped. I'm like, wow, I really can't even bring all these people together at the same time because they wouldn't get along. Like, is there something wrong with my friends? But the the one thing they had in common was me. And I think if you would talk to each one of them, they would all have a very different interpretation of who I am as a friend. And I think the same thing goes for my athletes. If they were to talk, they're like, well, he's really stern and mean, and this other person's like, we cry every week when we turn in our report. So yeah, and yeah, like, you know, each athlete's gonna require a different approach in order to you know, get them to maximize their physique.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys have heard me say this, but I don't think it's been on the channel. Like, I still attribute 99% of any coaching ability I have to coaching gymnastics for years and years and years. And I feel like I have an advantage of, as soon as I started with you guys, I felt very decently confident. But I think, like how Jeff, you said when you started coaching bodybuilding, you were kind of not so confident, and then you built it. But I think when I look at the time I started coaching gymnastics at 16 to the last time I coached it, or to when I stopped, I guess I was like 23 when I was coaching it, like the straight through. And if I look at those 7 years, my confidence as a coach and the caliber of athletes I was able to deal with and stuff like that. So luckily I got those kinks, I guess, worked out early. But as far as this industry right now, like, it makes me sad to see someone hire their coach, go through a prep, all their friends and family saw them look awesome on this one season, and now they're a coach. And I'm just like, what? How would y'all even train someone, though? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me go back to when I first started, like, the insecurities. It's like the lack of confidence was more attributed to the lack of knowledge with the science. Like, I had some knowledge, but it was more so like, you know, I don't have Eric Helm's knowledge, and I still don't, and probably never will.
Me neither.
But as I started coaching, I'm like, well, wait a second. This is not all entirely about science. This is actually getting person from point A to point B, get them there, and, you know, their goals in their best possible shape in the most healthy way possible. And that's something I realized after the first, you know, season or two, was like, I can do this. Like, I do this pretty well.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it's like the art of coaching. I think it's more than just, you know, the science. Of course, you need to have some knowledge base on that, but a lot of it is, you know, working like Berto, working with a vast group, you know, different groups of people, and being able to communicate well with those people and get along with those people. And I think I've done pretty well with that thus far.
Yeah, and it's like you do need that science and that experience with, like, the numbers and the judgment calls or whatever, but it's like they're all tools to be to be distributed as needed based on your art, if that makes sense. Like, using the tools of the science, how you use them and how you distribute them and when you choose to use them, depending on the human, I guess, is the art of it. Is what you're saying?
Well, it's like it's like you're working with a toolbox. Yeah. Like, you have your wrenches, your hammers, screwdrivers. You got to be able to know which tool is going to work the best in each different scenario. So you're not going to use a sledgehammer on a small little finishing nail. You know, you're going to use a little tiny finishing hammer. So it's just knowing those things is pretty important. And I think also too, I didn't realize was that when I first started, I was like, well, wait a second, you know, I got years and years of experience under my belt, and that I think I've leaned heavily on. So I guess you could say my education is informal, but it's definitely been through the trenches. And I use that almost every single day with my athletes, because I get to use everything that, you know, all the screw ups I've done over the years, which is countless, and we could probably do a whole podcast on that. But yeah, it's like, okay, I know not what to do, so let's not repeat this with the athletes.
And touching back to what you said, Andrea, about, you know, I guess people who just rush into coaching, I think, well, first of all, because of science, it's a lot safer now. Like, there's it's not many people are dying from potassium overdoses nowadays, right?
Not lately.
So that's good. And I think in general, a lot of people, they're more prepared than, say, when me and Jeff first started bodybuilding. You know, it was very hard to find anyone who was the least bit competent when it came to the scientific side of things. It was all bro science and make believe. But I guess the thing that gets me the most when I see someone rushing into it is, first of all, like you said, they're rushing into it. So experience, right? Like in my case, there's absolutely no one in this world that matters more to me. If Jeff tells me that I'm ready, then I'm ready, because the dude's seen everything. Mm-hmm. And so experience is like number one, and you're just not going to get that because you've been lifting for a year, and then you did a contest prep, and maybe you have really good genetics and you did quite well, and because of that, people assume that you must know what you're doing. So that's the first thing. Is experience is just so important. I think you need to have done this for a while, perhaps even have done some pro bono work. And to be honest, that's where the majority of I guess experiences relative to this came from, was just from helping out and working with people in a local gym setting. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing is going to be, and this is the one that Eric has mentioned before when he came up with that list of 5. We need to put that article somewhere.
Well, he said it in Instagram, and I'll link it to the show notes, like that little snippet video.
I think it was a progressive fitness. But
that one. Yeah. We can link that article too.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But emotional intelligence is just so important. And that doesn't mean that because you're emotionally intelligent that you're not going to lose your shit when you're prepping. I think all of us here do to some extent.
Yeah.
We just kind of, we know how to deal with it in the correct way, in the appropriate way. And that's the other thing, is often I will see that one of my athletes who I prep with, who I don't necessarily consider them very mature in regards to that, they're now out there dealing with a wide variety of people with many different needs. And that to me is a huge issue. And again, that doesn't mean that if you're emotional, you lose your shit every once in a while, that you're bad emotionally. That's not what I mean. I think it goes back to how you deal with your own emotions, and as well as the emotions of others, especially if you're a contest prep coach.
Yeah. And like you said, no one's died lately or whatever, but it's almost like, with me, my fear when I hear like someone jumping into it isn't necessarily they're going to die because of potassium overload, but it's the emotional damage that you can cause by pushing someone too hard or telling them that it's their fault that they didn't do it. Like I find that one of the biggest, this is a personality trait in general, is thinking that it's my fault. Like, a lot of these, I've seen, it's not just a bodybuilding coach thing, like it's a general coaching thing where I'm telling my athlete to do this, they're not doing it, they're idiots, now they don't care enough. When it's like, maybe I said it wrong, maybe I need a different approach, maybe, but it's always, and I find that that's just the ability to understand that, like, I could be fucking up, maybe it's not my athlete's fault.
Yeah.
And and it can be masked sometimes, especially with personal trainers, as I only take a select few. When it's like, really, they don't know how to work with anyone besides a certain personality type.
Yeah, it's Darwinism, basically, right? That's what that is.
And then so they accept only that personality type, which blends perfectly, so they only put out amazing athletes, and therefore I'm the best coach ever. When it's like, there's all these secret stories of people who got ditched along the way. Anyways.
I mean, I think we can all, we've done this before, where maybe there was a case where we could have pushed an athlete to perhaps be 5% better, but for whatever reason, we didn't go there because we were thinking, past this prep, and we wanted to keep them around for more than just one season. I think we've all done that at some point. We're like, hey, we'll have this talk afterwards because right now you're not ready, but
yeah.
But I was protecting it from you.
Yep, I have a case of that last year. I was prepping a teen, first show, first season. And, of course, as a young man like that, you're like, let's go, and I'll get shredded. But I didn't want to push him so damn hard that the experience was a bad one, where it's miserable. And they're just like, I hate this. I don't want to do this ever again. And as a first-time athlete, 19 years old, I'm 44, going to be 45, still doing this. So, I mean, you got years and years to go. So why would I crush someone in their very first season? And just, I knew that stress levels would be probably too much for this guy to handle. So of course I didn't, put my foot on the gas pedal the whole time. That way, it sets up, his next season, and because he just gained a ton of experience off the season, and be able to utilize that now in the next season. It's going to be far healthier. It's going to be far more beneficial. He's going to be far more successful. So I think a lot of times too, dealing with younger athletes, is that they want a pro card, or they want like this high esteem, like right now. And I can't recall, a Pop Warner football player or a high school football player being in the NFL next year. There's a gradual process, and there's no tier system like standard in bodybuilding. So the expectations are kind of all over the place, in my opinion. So there's you got to work yourself up to elite levels. And if we look at the standard of natural bodybuilding right now, the best guys are in their 40s, late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, not 24, 25, 20. On occasion, you get those genetic elite freaks, but the majority, the guys have been doing this for years and years and years, are the ones that are on top.
And I think that's
kind of a rant, but yeah.
No, it's important though, and it's hard to. It's like when people come into this sport, all of the research is done online, social media, websites, blah blah blah, that feature these elite athletes, but it's like the famous ones, the famous bodybuilders are like such a small percentage. Like I didn't realize this, that any pro show I've ever gone to, I'm like, I know like one of these dudes, and there's 20 people up there. Mm-hmm. And the famous amateurs are like Insta famous, YouTube famous, whatever, but there's hundreds of them that, so I think that just the perception is skewed entering the sport, especially with young people who that's all they learn is Instagram or whatever. I found that hard, or I guess that surprised me, how anyone that's like 30 or under is like, I see so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and that's their goal, and they eat like so-and-so, and they saw this article, and they'll even tell me like the names and the articles and the videos and whatever, and I'm like, I hate to it's hard for me to not say like, you're not them, and you're far from them, or like that's many years down the road or whatever. And so it's hard. But again, when you have 1,000 kids in Pop Warner, they understand that. But it's weird how when I get my first client and they're like, I'm going to be like so-and-so, and you're like, no, not for a long time. I don't know. Anyways, that's something that I deal with as a coach. That surprised me, was how many people don't understand.
This actually, and I was thinking about this the other day.
Okay.
One of my favorite books is called Writing in the Dark. And when I think of my first few years of weight training, that's what it was. I remember I was just so locked into my zone and just doing me. I didn't even know there was crappy music playing in the gym. I didn't know half the gym members there. I was just there to work. But then I think it gets to the point, and I think we're all guilty of this.
Yeah.
And eventually I got strong enough to the point where I was strong enough where, I would be lifting something and then people would stop to see the show. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes you can't help but have that alter your behavior. And you're like, what, put some tens on that. I gotta put on the show.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue now with social media, is that everyone to some extent has some sort of platform.
Right.
And sometimes it makes them do things that they wouldn't necessarily do. That in the back of their mind, they know that's probably not right in the long run. And that's just something that I didn't have to deal with. My version of that was just because, these chicks are watching me bench press, so I better load up an extra plate or something, right? So that's
a pretty good story to follow. This is back in my high school days, so there was no internet, but the big thing was the weight room in high school, right? The big thing in high school, I was the big man on campus. I had all the muscles. I could bench press 300 pounds. So every time I lifted, I had people watching. Uh-huh. Well, smart ass me, I got on the leg press, pile a bunch of weight on. So of course, everybody's coming to watch. They're surrounding me on the leg press. Of course, I blew out the biggest fart, because obviously I'm straining my ass off. And you could guess what happens next. I get crushed by the weight. They had to pull it off of me. But yeah, it was like that, like you're saying, my ego got inflated, and it was like every time I trained, I had this like little entourage watching me train, and so I could only imagine if social media existed back in 1990,
Yeah.
I would have been pretty ugly. I would have been pretty ugly.
Well, I'm a prime example of that. I mean, like 2013, shit, I got YouTube famous from getting accepted by Alberto, and I tracked all that, whatever. And as soon as I was done, the backlash, and that's the thing too, is like, we have athletes that I've seen, or now I say we, but it was before I was on the team, that you see them grow and grow and grow, and everything's posted, and then when season's over, they go away. They like hide, like Insta hide and YouTube hide, and I tried not to, but it's really, it's almost, I mean, you're not like real life famous, but everyone sees you not like that, right? You become famous at your absolute best, and then, because like right now I sit at like 148 pounds-ish, but I remember I competed at 118, I got to like 125, and then the whole, oh, she got a boyfriend, she's fat, da-da-da-da, and I'm just like, because I got with Brandon on YouTube as well, my boyfriend right now, so it's like, I think it's almost one of my jobs too, I feel like, with athletes, is when I see them, because y'all Instagram look at all your athletes all the time? I do.
Yeah.
Just to see how they feel, like Insta stalking
Great
athletes.
background search.
Yeah.
A few here and there. But,
yeah, and if I
not all
see
the time.
them getting like, not too big for their britches, but I'm like, oh, they think they're a big deal. And it's like, not in a bad way to bring them down, but I feel like it's also part of my coaching job to be like, just remember, when this is over with, this isn't going to be you forever. And the way that, like you said, like, prepping them to not be like that forever. Like, because the first time someone gets so shredded, they're like, I'm never losing this. And when you do, it's dark, and if you're that public, it's even darker. And again, I just feel like that's part of coaching, is for us to maybe foresee the things that they can't see because they're so caught up in what they're doing, that it's like getting them a peak week program early, or talking to them about recovery diets early. It's also like, okay, their head is in a place that's going to be bad when they gain 5 pounds.
Or for example, when you were coaching kids, Andrea, I'm pretty sure you had to take into account what they went home to. That was a big part of what you did. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, here's my report. You send back the reply to their report, and you're like, I hope I hit every nail on the head, if I had to use a hammer, and hopefully that guides you in your, I guess, this new Instagram, social media type of world, where it's I guess it's a little bit bigger than like what Jeff experienced, where like, hey, a leg press falls on you and you fart, they can literally fart.
In my head, it's so funny, dude. Like seeing it replay in my head.
There was girls around, there was guys. I mean, it was just
And if you'd at least made the press, it wouldn't be so bad. But you farted and you got crushed.
Farted, started laughing, and it crushed me. But yeah, it's like we're coaching people. That's the thing. We're coaching not just the protocol. We're coaching people, and I think I do a lot. We all do a lot of life coaching. It's not just, hey, here's the X's and O's.
Yeah. How would you, like, Bert, you said pro bono stuff, but like how? I guess I made a video like a year ago saying like, I don't personally take on bodybuilding clients because this and this and that. And then with you guys, as we all know, it was like a different dynamic or whatever. But someone asked me, or a few people in that video were like, why? Like, if you say that coaching experience is important and dealing with those people is important, blah, 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 how does someone get that experience unless they actually start working with competitors? So like, how would you guys recommend that?
The way I did it is I think it was like 2 athletes the very first season, and I took them from start to finish. It was only 2.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's just, okay, let's take on maybe 1 or 2 more, and then you just gradually start, picking up experience and gaining more confidence and seeing different scenarios, because you work with a wide array of people, you're going to have different types of scenarios come up, not just X's and O's, but like stressors. Like everybody has different stressors. So how you handle those stressors is huge, in my opinion. So yeah, that would be, it's just like, just like Berto was saying, maybe just do one or two for free. You're helping somebody out, but you're also helping yourself out by trying to gain experience and slowly build up. I mean, I wouldn't say like, okay, you do your first contest season, you're 21 years old, you do your first show, you do great, but I wouldn't take on 20, 30 athletes in the first season,
Yeah.
I can remember back in high school and I bench pressed 300. I was pretty jacked. I mean, just because I was the buff guy on campus didn't mean I know what the hell I was doing. Especially at 18, 19, 20 years old, in my opinion anyway, not too many 18, 19, 20-year-olds are well equipped enough emotionally to handle different types of stressors. They haven't even experienced life yet. But now you're going to handle someone else's life. That to me is a little intimidating. Like for me, if I'm having someone coach me, I want them to be, not just, well versed with the latest science and all that, but they need to have their shit in order and be able to handle different scenarios that's going to come up with a contest prep or, powerlifting meets or whatever, the goal is.
I also, like, that's one thing that I will say for personal training, right? I think that if you can do in-person personal training, that is very much a skill in itself. It's like because it's general pop, the science of it doesn't matter so much because almost anything you do is going to make them better. But the ability to greet someone, hi, how they doing, and give them feedback on the fly like that in person, and not just personal training, but again, like I say, my gymnastics coaching, or maybe you're a camp counselor or whatever. I just feel like the ability, like you said, Bert, to just adapt to people in general is like, whether you sit and nerd out on all the latest research, can you deal with humans on the fly? Like, it's almost like any situation you'd want to put yourself in that would be good practice, I feel like. If I knew I wanted to be a bodybuilding coach and I've only had like an admin job and I know my science, my advice would be like, go work at a place, and then you could get paid for it too, at a place where you have to deal with people. Is that random?
Yeah, that's the appropriate route, but people want it now, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Oh, okay. So I think too, something that we have, I don't know if y'all have always done it, actually. This is a good question. Have you always done the video check-ins with an athlete? Did y'all ever try to do it just text?
That's how we started. Just emailed, typed emails.
I couldn't imagine that. I guess we should tell everyone how we coach now.
Yeah. Well,
I would say.
Always...
Yeah, go ahead, Berto.
Go ahead, Berto.
No, it wasn't always that way. It was almost like just a little better than a typewriter, basically.
We chiseled it.
I remember.
It
was just replies, and then often the people who are most likely to hire a coach, usually they're very curious. They want to know what's best practice when it comes to just about everything. And it just got to the point where it's like, oh, that took over an hour. I need to be a bit more, and it was exhausting. So we turned. I think I turned to video because it was just a lot more practical, but it ended up being just a way better tool because it's a lot more personal. They get to know you.
Personable, exactly. Yeah.
I could not imagine doing this without video. I couldn't imagine, and I know that that's the normal, right? The normal is spreadsheets and text replies, whereas again, we didn't say, I guess, for those of y'all listening, we do ask for not only the spreadsheet, like every athlete has a spreadsheet that has their nutrition, their body weight tracked, their training tracked, all that stuff. So we ask for that every week in a report, along with physique photos or video, along with either text or video check-in. But I always say I prefer video if at all. And that's basically, how are they doing this week? How are they feeling? How is training? Tell me about life. Libido, happiness, stress, all kinds of crazy stuff, And I don't know. I pretty much, if I don't hear from an athlete via video, like if they're crazy and this week they had to get me through text, that's fine. But if I go 2 or 3 weeks without a video, I'll be like, I'll put my foot down on that because I don't feel like I can get what I need from them otherwise.
Yeah, I think going back to the art of coaching, this is something that this season especially, it's like the athletes, because at first I was giving them choices. You could either send me the typed up email, or you could send me a video report, and you can't get all the communication out through typing. So I've been kind of saying, okay, I really want you to start giving me the videos, because you'll get a video report and they might type up, hey coach, everything's great this week, the numbers, everything looks good, we're progressing, but you can't really see expressions, you can't hear how that is coming through. And what I'm been really good at is reading people. So when they're sending me a video report and they say, coach, everything is great this week, and you can see that they're kind of suffering, like their communication, their patterns, like in the beginning of prep, everything's all excited, jittery, bubbly. Then as the preps goes on, they get more hungry, they're getting leaner, they're getting more lethargic. All of a sudden their mannerisms are changing. And if they say everything's great, but I see their mannerisms just really kind of slow and they're not really perky, then I could, ask questions. Hey, you sure you're okay? What else is going on? Et cetera, et cetera. And there's been times where I've picked up on that, and based on that, I'll make adjustments. Yeah. Maybe everything in the spreadsheet looks phenomenal. They're losing, they're half a pound a week or whatever we're trying to do. Training's going great, but, deep down there's something else going on. There's some stressors there. And if, it's like, okay, maybe we add food here, maybe we cut cardio down, deload or whatever. Next week we feel a hell of a lot better, then we could dig again. So it's like really kind of picking up on those things, figuring out what stressors are what, and, not running an athlete into the ground when they're maybe experiencing some life stress that's going on, maybe relationship issues, job issues. That's like the last time, time permitting though. I mean, I'd want to say, okay, let's lower food down or throw more cardio at you. Let's do the opposite. Let's get you feeling better again. Then we'll get back to digging. So those video reports, in my opinion, they're gold.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, you can't beat it.
And sometimes too, like we do the best we can, and the clients do, with giving us physique photos or videos or whatever. But something that I totally didn't expect was sometimes if they give me physique photos in like their bathroom or whatever, and I'm like, looks pretty much the same as last week. But if I look at their face on some people, I'm like, oh damn, you are sunken in. Like we're doing things, just because it's up close and I can actually see it. But I see a lot of facial changes. Sometimes before I'll see a physique, because like the lighting's different or because a different time of day or whatever, like they look about the same. And then when I see them up close talking, I'm like, oh, those are cheekbones sticking out.
Yeah, you could pick up on things like that. Actually, I had one guy that his face was so sunk, and it was early in a prep. I'm like, man, this guy, I must be doing something wrong. So I'm like, hey man, you're not looking too good. You sure you're okay? I go, you have like the face I used to have when I deplete water. That's how bad it looked, back in the day. And he's like, no, this is how I get when I prep. I usually get a very sunken face. And yeah, it's like his body didn't really show the signs, but his face did. But it gave me the clue to ask that question. And if he just typed things out, there's no way of knowing that.
Yeah. Do you guys ever, like, what is the determining thing that you'd ever be like, you know what, I want to Skype you instead of a video call? Because I do that decently often, but I want to know.
You mean a YouTube video? Like a Skype call versus a YouTube video?
Yeah, that's what I meant. What did I say? It doesn't matter what I said, but yes, that's what I meant.
Okay. Go ahead, Bert.
I think often when I've done that, it's it usually hasn't been bodybuilding related stuff. It's been other things that have happened in their life.
Yeah.
And to just kind of go with that, because usually almost everything that's bodybuilding related, like we can handle, via the traditional way. But it's usually other things, like things that are life stresses that were just totally unexpected. Then we sit down and just really lay everything out. But that's been the number one reason for me, typically.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
I
just had one.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
There's really, if you think about it, bodybuilding is just that. It's bodybuilding. It's a sport.
Yeah.
There's no real emergencies in bodybuilding.
Right.
You know, you trying to figure out how many carbs you need to eat before you go to bed. You know, I got 50 carbs. What do I eat? That's not an emergency. You know? We're talking about like big life decisions. Like a lot of these conversations I have on Skype that I need a Skype is based on whether or not to shut down a prep because of life stressors.
Okay.
That's like one of the main topics that comes up, you know, whether it's relationship issues, school, you know, family, whatever. So yeah.
I have two. Well, like just this week, I Skyped with someone instead of a check-in because they're going to like out of the country for like 10 days, and I'm like, are we sure we have this? That was it. It was just kind of like, are we sure we're on the same page? How are we feeling? Da-da-da. You're going to be gone for a while, just making sure that they had everything. And then the other one is even if they do send videos, it's like a 2-minute video every week. Like, I'm good. This is what I ate. I feel good. See ya. And like, yeah, they're doing what I ask, but I'm like, I just need to like ask you some questions just to touch base, like after 10 weeks of, you know, a 50-second video. So that's the only other time that I do it too. I'm just wondering.
That's it. That just shows you're a caring coach.
Yeah, which is
I think
very important.
Yeah, when we're talking like the context of a prep, like you'll have some weeks where things just go great, you know, or job of losing a pound, everything's fine, you know, and you'll get those 2-minute videos.
Yeah, like no news is good news.
And you could read them and go, yeah, okay, everything's great. You send them a 2-minute video back, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Then you'll have those weeks where shit hits the fan, and now you got a 10-minute video because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the scenarios. But yeah.
Although sometimes there is people, and I think is our demographic has changed a bit, who are very much adults, and you know they don't want to sit there and talk with me every week about what they can add to their pre-workout stack to make it perfect. I have a few guys that are pros that basically they just need someone to keep them objective, and with him I allow them to have much shorter reports because generally they're busy adulting, and that's fine. But then there's other times where, you know, usually they're a talker, and even they'll send you about as much as ever, but just because you've gotten to know that person, you know that there's something else up and they're not telling you. And you can make that call simply because of video, and you're like, dude, are you sure everything's okay? And then you find out that, you know, I blew my diet a few times, and actually I put in some numbers on the spreadsheet, weigh-ins too, and I figured I could clean it up by next week, which has happened. And if I didn't ask that question, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
What are the other signs that y'all find someone you're like, dude, you messed up, didn't you? I need to ask you about this. What are the signs besides like, or is it all just intuitive for you guys?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the video, like you can see, I can tell, like, you know, if someone's reporting in, they got cheeks like mine right now, you know, when they should have Skeletor cheeks, you know, then I know, okay, we just had a binge.
Yeah.
You know, or if I see, you know, a couple weigh-ins missing after a refeed, you know, that's kind of alarming too. Or if you see a huge spike ups in refeeds, then you're like, okay, you know, this refeed shouldn't have had a 5-pound gain, maybe a 2-pound. So those things you kind of can question.
Yeah.
Or I've had an athlete, true story, 6-7 weeks, no progress, and I was doing everything. Okay, let me take food away. Let's add food, take away. I mean, I was doing everything you could think of to try to get this person to progress. And I started really kind of doubting myself as a coach. I'm like, man, I'm doing everything here, and I'm not making the right calls. I'm like, I suck, basically. And I felt bad because here I am, this person's relying on me to make the calls to get him to progress. You know, long story short, after the season's over with, you know, I find out, you know, he confesses later on how he's nibbling on things here and there. Right. So these things, and I didn't pick up on it. And that's probably, you know, going through those experiences, that's where I was probably a bit too compassionate, where I probably should have relied on a little bit more instincts and said, you know, just call the person out and say, look, you know what, are you really adhering? And, you know, just be honest, because you're not hurting me any by not telling me. You're hurting yourself and your progress. So that kind of was one thing I definitely learned, was that you kind of have to call people out from time to time when needed.
And that's important too, I guess, when we're talking the art of coaching is understanding, like you said, you had some self-doubt and some internal questioning of your abilities when someone's, and like people who are trying to get into coaching for bodybuilding, it's like you got to be prepared to be like, damn, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know, that just kind of feels shitty, and I wouldn't have thought about that. Although I've had those moments too, but...
Didn't I mess up once on you? Like, I think at some point in your prep, I made the wrong adjustment. I might have. I vaguely remember. But I'm quick to say that, is what I'm saying. I messed up, but that was the wrong move.
Yeah, and
I think
called me. You called me.
I kind of messed up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take that back. Yeah.
We bulked into my first show, but it wasn't... I think that was it. Not really, but we were just like, we were super, like, I gained like 3 pounds. But it wasn't just that. I think it was a combination of things, me not communicating to you how freaked out I was. I also stress bloat in conjunction with, I was like, man, I don't feel that bad, but on my insides, and if I was being honest, I was like, man, I feel really big today. I should have told him that. So I think that was kind of like a both of our thing, like, because me as an athlete, as you know, I just want to please coach. Like, that's all. I just want to, whatever you say, it's great. I'm good. And then afterwards, I was like, I was a mess, and and I come back crying and shit. But
and it's part of your job as a coach to be like, I don't know the answer. I goofed up. I think just as you expect your athlete to be transparent with you, you should do the same.
Yeah. But that's like some of the athletes that I've had a long tenure with. Like, we've only gotten better. Like, because they're not perfect, I'm not perfect, but together going through those experiences, we've gotten better. So some of the ones that have been on my roster for 2-3 years, they're really, really coming into their own. Versus like you get someone brand new, you don't really know that person, so it takes time to, build that relationship and to figure out how each of us ticks and how well we're going to gel together. So I think, from our perspective, like, we need to be very patient with athletes and build that, but also I think it's a two-way street. Right. And there's been times where, I maybe have not made the right call, and, the athlete kind of just goes their own way because their expectation is this coach needs to know everything, how I operate. So it definitely, I think it's one of those things where you have to build that relationship over time.
I think that's great advice for athletes, though. Like, if you do your homework and if you, like, you guys saw me not only with Berto, obviously, being my coach, but with this most recent, me picking my coach now that I have for my other training. Like, it's such a big decision, and I feel like as an athlete, it is my responsibility to do enough research up front so that when I do find that coach, I will not question it. Not question it, like be blind about it and not be able to communicate. But for example, like how me and Bert just said, like we had a little mess up, but immediately it's like, okay, now we know that and we move on together. It's not like, oh, he fucked up, I'm done with him, see you later. And it's like, if that's something important too, is the athlete being just as committed to the coach, because now, it did get better and it will continue to get better season after season. But if you you're like, well, so-and-so is this coach, like, I guess. And then as an athlete, I know that I've had like gymnasts and actually clients too, that I can tell they don't completely trust me. And I know, and it's not just in their questioning, but like, are you sure? And like, they'll try to take an inch from me, which turns into like a half mile, it turns into a mile. And it's like not understanding that as an athlete, it's your job to, I guess, find someone, whether it's us or not, just find someone that you trust, because you can mess it up. And then those same people end up blaming it on the coach and whatever. But that's a good point. That was all I was saying.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to, especially when it comes to this sport, you're going to, especially at the later stages, left to your own device, you're going to do stuff that you would not do with someone else, even if you know what you're doing. Yeah. And that's why you need someone that you trust, because often they might make a few calls that you're like, I don't think I feel comfortable with that, but it ends up being the best call.
Well, and the calls that you made 9 times out of 10 that work best with me is like, just trust me, Andrew. You just go, he goes, I'm playing the trust me bro card. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I don't question it. And those tend to work out better than anything I would have done.
Yeah.
Also, I think what's unique about the sport too is in order to find a mess up, shit, that takes months, weeks. Whereas like basketball, all right, you missed a shot, that didn't work, let's try again. You know, you miss a pitch in baseball, all right, didn't work, try again. Here it's like, oh, a 6-month prep, we messed up this week, now we got to wait another 6 weeks and test it again, and that takes patience.
Yeah, and I guess I could probably say this probably maybe better than you guys. I've done like 30 shows.
Yeah.
Not one of them's been perfect yet. As far as it's always going to be evolving. Like you're always you'll be successful at times, but you're gonna mess up a lot too. So yeah, it's just like I'm still getting better as I'm going until my body will basically stop on me. But yeah, it's just gonna evolve and evolve and evolve and evolve. You're never gonna be perfect. And a coach is never going to be perfect, because I could always look at all of my athletes and go, damn, maybe I should have did this or that, and this could have got them better. Mm-hmm. So you're always going to question those things. But I can say, like, it's kind of cool to look back when I first started coaching to now, how I've evolved as a coach, and the methods that we've been using has evolved as well. So it's just going to keep getting better, in my opinion.
So I have a big question for y'all that doesn't apply to me. So we've been sitting here for 50 minutes talking about the art of coaching and how important it is and how it takes such a skilled individual, all that stuff. But you guys don't use coaches. I know y'all use each other, but tell me about that, how that works out for you guys.
Go ahead. You go first. I think Berto's a little more open to it than I am, but we'll talk about it.
Well, I think the fat loss portion with me, it's actually something it's super easy and super straightforward. So I've never really felt like I've needed anyone when it comes to that. I do, however, I've my ex-girlfriend Melissa, I would use her quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I'm like, am I losing my stuff here? Just because she sees me every day, and she was like my monitor 24/7. So that's probably as close as I got to that part. But this last contest prep, I actually used someone for the training portion. I wanted to do powerlifting alongside with bodybuilding, and I got the goal done, but I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't have I had Ben Escrow from De Novo Nutrition do my training, and I think it was valuable to me as a coach because it put me on the other side. Like I realized, like, wow, I wanted to please him. Every week that I had plus sets, it's like I want to bring back something good. Mm-hmm. And when I didn't, I was like, man, I'm going to have to tell him that this week just didn't go according to plan. So it was actually quite beneficial to be on the other side when it comes to that. And I think perhaps should I do something like that again next time I prep? I really doubt it because it wasn't nearly as fun as I thought it would be. To try to combine two things, or those two things anyways. That part simply because it lets me be an athlete when it comes to the weight training part of it. But I think we all still kind of rely on each other to some extent. Right. And I think more than anything, it's probably on the emotional side of things.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like they've coached me in not directly, but indirectly, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I remember when I went from bro dieting, 2009, when I won my pro cards, I was bro, I was like, okay, 6 meals, same foods, blah, blah, blah. And then once I met these guys, watching Berto do, flexible dieting, I'm like, oh, okay, let me use some of the things that he's doing and watched what he was doing and started incorporating into my methods. And then, listening to Eric talk about, okay, Jeff, try more volume, do more volume, let's change up your rep ranges, et cetera, go away from training to failure. So just taking his ideas, philosophies, okay, incorporating it, and then, really leaning on Brad with emotional stuff. It's like I just incorporated all of these different tools that they use and made it my own. So it's like they've indirectly been coaching me. And what I learned from my last prep was that I said, all right, Berto, go ahead. I'm going to let you coach me. And, he sent me over protocols, but just the way my schedule is, like my family dynamic, it was just a stressor to try to follow that protocol. like it was a stressor. It was not that it was a bad protocol. It was just a stressor because it just wasn't really jiving with life schedule. So basically I was like, you know what, right now the best coach for me is me, because that way I know how to, you know, basically change things when I need to. I'm utilizing all my experience to do that. And that's how I coach my veterans that I coach now that have been in this game for a long time. Their training, a lot of times I'll let them handle their training because they know themselves better than I do in the weight room. So why am I going to like handcuff them in the weight room when they have all this experience? So basically that's, for me anyways, I needed to not have those handcuffs on. When it came time to peak, then I was like, okay, Berto, go ahead and peak me. And, you know, he wrote out the peak play and I like executed 100%. First peak went really well. We did, you know, obviously won the Pro International. We did really well at Worlds, got fourth. But, you know, we made a little bit of mistakes there. We came in a little flat. But he gave me, like, I said, all right, after prelim, I was like, Roberto, I'm flat. And I said, I'm eating. And he was like, basically just, okay, you're Marshawn Lynch. You know, you could run down the hole, go ahead and take it. So he gave me that power to adjust. So that's kind of my experience with me being coached. It's like, it's hard just because of my dynamic, my life dynamic, to follow like specific protocol. Because like right now I don't have a specific training program per se. Like I have something on paper, but it's auto-regulated quite often, just because sometimes I can't train when I want to or how I like to because of life priorities.
Yeah, and then another thing I guess to be said too is we still, even though I guess technically you would say like, oh, y'all don't have a coach, but you do, because you do weekly check-ins still. Like I don't think everyone knows that either. That's like the five of us coaches check in with each other on a personal level once a week. So that's not, I'm just saying I think that is different than like not having a coach. Because you still have someone that's there to tell you, hey, you're losing your shit, dude. You know?
Yeah. We have a network, a big supportive network of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I leaned on these guys in 2011 because at that time, that's when I was going through a divorce. Not too many people know it. I was prepping, going through divorce. Not that I was getting divorced because of bodybuilding. It was just something totally, you know, different. But, you know, with those such high stress levels, there was like, I don't know how many binges I had. You know, and I leaned on these guys when I binged. And of course, Berto's like, dude, why are you binging on rice cakes? Binge on a burrito if you're going to binge. That was my inside joke. Yeah, but no, seriously, like they totally like helped me get through some of those situations. And Eric is a huge part in helping me going through that probably the hardest part in my life. So he coached me outside the gym more so than, that's probably the most coaching I've ever had. But he definitely helped to change the way I think emotionally, and he helped like get me to where I am now as far as that big life change I went through, because that was probably the roughest part of my life that I've ever had, was divorce, going through bankruptcy, losing your job. You know, that's when I lost a job at the auto plant. So it was just like the only thing I had that was a positive was prep. So like, you know, the prep wasn't like the stressor. It was actually something that I needed that was positive in such a rough part of my life. Yeah. So if I didn't have these other three guys coaching me through all that, man, I would have been a mess.
Eric and I touched on that when I was interviewing him, that like at some times there's people, I mean, we talked about a little bit ago, where the prep has become their life and it's everything they are, and it's, you know, obsession, and it's taking away and ruining their perspective, blah, blah. But there's other times where like people find themselves, you know, or like it's a solace to be in that. Like how you said, it's like the prep and the sport of it can be almost like a healing thing at the same time. But I guess that's also an art of coaching thing. Like, do you see someone falling to the rigors and setting themselves up for a really bad off season? Like when this is over, they're going to lose their shit. Or is it like helping them through it because, you know, when it's over, there's like all this freedom on the other side?
Oh, so here's something to kind of...
Go ahead, Bert.
I'm gonna nail this one.
Okay, I'm ready.
So one of the issues
with a
is,
sledgehammer,
with a big one too, the carnival kind. Okay, so like the bro diets, you would get your menu plan, and this is what you knew. You knew that your coach gave you these 6 meals, and the big issue with that was that after that, you kind of were stranded. You didn't know what to do next. And I think one of the hallmarks of good coaching is that after the prep is done, you leave with a lot of new information that will be with you, or approaches to things that will be with you long after the prep is done. And I think a big part of that, and that's one thing that Jeff mentioned, was how Eric helped him with the emotional side of things. And that's we talked about emotional intelligence quite a bit here today, and that's something that if you do that with an athlete, that's, they're like, wow, after this prep I'm just so much more emotionally aware, and I didn't have that prior. That's more important than any trophy, placing, pro card, or what have you.
Yeah, because I've been on both sides where when I prepped, like when I was in my early 20s, it was, like you said, Andrew, it was an obsession. Like that was the focal point of my life, and everything else around it did not matter. So it was totally opposite ends of the spectrum. In the beginning, it was an obsession, and then in 2011, it was like that was my only positive in life. Yeah. And if you're let's say you go through one prep, you're very young, and now you're coaching athletes. That's what I'm talking about. Life experiences, like that experience, even though as shitty as it was, losing everything I had in that year, that taught me more than the previous 10 years of my life. So that whole experience, I gained so much knowledge, and now I can share that with people who are now going through a contest prep. So it's just, you need to know your X's and O's, but you have to have that emotional side too, so you can handle people's different situations. And so that definitely, I think, being on both sides of the spectrum, that's where experience plays a huge role.
I think it's interesting too. It's not as common, but I've seen people, but I can think of people that have done it right too. I think it's important that whoever's coaching bodybuilders has been through a contest prep. Sometimes that doesn't happen, y'all. Have y'all seen this?
So very few people who I think can get away with that.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. There's one person in my head, I'm like, damn, but I would trust them. But most of the time, it's just hard to. It's hard to.
Pregnant ladies do the Lamaze class, right? Like it's like I couldn't teach that, right? I'm not gonna teach them how to breathe, right?
But it's just
well, if you don't have that, you've never been through a prep before.
You gotta know what that feels like.
This athlete you're coaching is deep into prep, and they're starving out their yin yang, and you're like, oh yeah, go ahead, drop your carbs 50. Like there's no, you don't even know what that even feels like, and now you're telling us. So how can you relate to that? Yeah. Not to say that you couldn't coach, because if we look at the NFL, there's plenty of coaches that never played a down in the NFL and that are good coaches, but still, it's always nice to be able to to be able to relate to that person, what they're going through.
Yeah. It's like you're going to send a wide receiver over the middle. He's going to get stuck, but you've never been hit like that before.
Right.
Why y'all got to do the tools? Right? Why y'all got to do the tools and the football analogies that I don't understand? Why y'all got to do that?
You're from Texas. You should know.
Come on, Andrew. So if you're a wide receiver, you're going across the middle, catch a pass for the first down. There's usually a middle linebacker who's about 250 to 260 pounds, ready to rip your head off. That's what it means. So basically, if I say, okay, Berto, in your last leg of prep, we're going to go 100 carbs. I'm basically sending him down over the middle, get that first down.
And I know I'm going to get rewarded, but I'm going to get a huge hit. And not until you've been hit do you know what that feels like.
Yeah. Word. So I've never played it down in the NFL. It's like, it's hard to relate.
Well, and I think too, like you talked about it for a second, like education. I do find that when I have someone new, it's their first prep, they've never been coached before. Every check-in is like, hey, I'm doing it right, blah, blah. P.S. Here's the other 5 quick fitness questions I've been wondering because I read it in Men's Health, and supplement and cardio and
Google,
right? But but they're always nice. Like, I just want to know your opinion on it, But regardless of that, like, I think a hallmark of a good coach too is, especially in this sport where there must be an off season. There just must be. Is I call it graduating. Like when I'm talking to someone, I'm like, you're done good, it's time to be done, and you graduate out of it. Instead of like, hey, it's kind of like me saying like, you don't need me anymore. We did our job. Like that was my job. Come back in a while. And that's what was always so shitty about personal trainers. It's like if you're doing your job and educating your client, they shouldn't still be your client maybe 5 years from now. I realize they're going to pay you for 5 years, but it's like knowing when to let someone go, making sure that you aren't creating someone who's reliant on you. Because I know we've all seen that in the gym where, and I think the same thing goes for us, you know, like it's, like Berto, you just told me, like, all right, I think we're ready. I'll see you in like 6 months for a Skype, whatever. But I think that it sucks when people see the dollars over the coaching, right? Does that make sense?
And it's kind of flattering because they want to keep you around, obviously, because you're very useful. They see the benefit in having your guidance. But on my side, it's kind of like, you're still here, dude. And quite often, you almost anticipate what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have y'all ever
Hopefully
had? Yeah, but do you guys sometimes have people that when you're like, all right, we've done good, I think you're healthy, you know how to train yourself, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's switch over to Skype. And they're like, but I want you every week. Does that happen to you?
Yeah. Yeah. It depends. Like I'll ask them, well, what do you need? Like, what's your needs? Is it more for accountability?
That's
or,
true.
You know what I mean? Or is it just you feel insecure? So you kind of get a feel for like what this person's needs are, and is it even, you know, obviously if they have their shit together, you know, you don't want to just, okay, yeah, I'm taking their money every month or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't feel good about that. So if I feel like they're ready to go, then it's my job to let them go with confidence, saying, no, you got this, you're good. You know, nothing's really going to change too much. You know all the tools. You've gone through an entire prep. You're in your office. You have all the tools now. Don't overcomplicate any of the things. You know, just keep it simple. And so if you give them that confidence when they leave, it's an easier transition. And you just let them know, hey, you know, if something you're really not sure of, just drop me a line, you know.
Yeah.
And it's more about just reassurance at that point. Because if they've gone through an entire prep or, you know, like they've been with you for months, they got the tools. It's just reassuring their confidence. But yeah, there's been plenty of times where I've said, okay, time for you to kind of fly out the nest now. You're on your own.
Fly out the
But then there's
nest.
some that I
like that.
keep. They're like, you know, I really want the reassurance, not the reassurance, but the accountability.
Yeah.
Then there's times when I'll keep people on for accountability until they're like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. What's the longest someone's been on your roster? This is a random question. I'm just wondering.
4 years in my case.
Wow.
4 years. And here's the thing, it was off season. And there's no other way of putting it, but this person was just a very poor responder to weight training in general.
Okay.
And it's like we would inch for, one of those situations where it's like we put on weight, it's all fat, we take it off, we lost whatever muscle we put on. So it was one of those things. So in their case, it was an exception. It was like, okay, we need to figure this out. And since you have such little room for error and you really love this, and it's not a financial burden, let's go ahead and do that. Right. So 4 years.
Yeah, I have one right now. I took him through a prep, went through an entire off season. This is week to week too, and now we're back into another prep. But the relationship obviously is really solid, but the progress too, in my opinion, is really solid too. Like because of the relationship we've built, so we know each other, how we tick. So we've gotten to the point now where it's like, in the off season, it's like, hey Jeff, you know, I'm getting bored of this programming or whatever. You know, what do you think of changing? I'm like, this is what I want you to do. You go ahead and design your program, give it to me, let me look at it, and I'll tweak some of the things that maybe I think that aren't good or whatever. So together we built programs over the off season. Yeah. So it was almost like we both learned from each other, but at the same time we progressed extremely well. And I think, you know, of course, probably after the season, it's probably time for him to fly the coop because he's like he's got it all down.
Yeah, Berto and I did that.
But so I think a lot of times it's like, especially with him, it was like just giving him the freedom to experiment with his own stuff, and then me look at it and reassure, you know, yeah, that looks good, or no, that doesn't look good. Let's tweak it here and there.
Word. I think we should end with some good resources for people who are trying to get into coaching, but need to work on their art a little bit. I know, well, Shredded by Science, shout out to Luke and Lawrence, and they're hosting us in June/July. Well, we leave June, but in July we're doing a seminar there for them. But I think they do a great job of teaching an entire human being how to be a coach, as opposed to like, here's just the tools and nails, or football players or whatever, the tools. But other than that, I mean, what else would y'all say? I mean, personal training, or getting an environment where they talk to people.
Yeah, I mean, I have I guess there's probably a few books you could get from this person, but when I was getting into coaching, I'm like, who's a good coach? Like, who's some of the best coaches out there? They're not even pertaining to bodybuilding.
Right.
So I'm like, John Wooden, I don't know if you know who it is yet,
Yeah.
but I mean, he's one of the, in my opinion, one of the best coaches of all time in any sport. So I read his books. You know, basically it's John Wooden on leadership.
Okay.
And basically it's like he's very like old school and simple, but very structured, very organized. And to me, like, that's the skills in that book is basically how I coach a lot of my athletes. It has nothing to do with science or, you know, basically with any X and O stuff. It's like all that like emotional intelligence that he had, like I just taken it and applied it to bodybuilding. So that to me, it's for me as a great resource.
That's awesome. Well, any sports psych too, it gets
I
overlooked.
think I think if you had a room filled with coaches from many different sports, they would all have they would have a lot of things in common to talk about. So I think I co-sign on that. That's probably a good place to start. I can't give any specific recommendations because I think when it comes to that part, it's been very informal in my case.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree that when I first got into this, like looking back at what I thought were my expectations as a coach, like I guess when I think of what we use a football team again, like I think general manager, that's kind of what I thought, like what makes sense on paper, right? But in reality, it takes me back to like my coach in high school, like grabbing me, and you can't do that with kids anymore, but grabbing me and being like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, you should be in class, you know? And that's what a lot of good coaching is going to be. And so that's why something like that would make sense.
Realizing that you're their friend, their therapist, so I mean anything on just dealing with humans, as opposed to, because the science shit's out there. I mean, it's out there easily, but I think it's just maybe I wish coaches in all sports, and at the highest levels they know this, but I guess any new coaches that I've had to work with, like in the gymnastics training center that I hired or whatever, it's like being open to listening also, I feel like is the big thing. Learning how to listen, and how to read, I guess like it was just noticing when someone was telling me something different than their body was telling me. So just being able to receive feedback, verbal and nonverbal, I think is really important. So I don't know. That's all I have to say. Anything else before we leave today?
Don't leg press in front of like 10 people.
Especially females.
Exactly.
When you've had lunch. That's good. We'll end on that. All right. Thanks for chatting, guys. And we'll talk to y'all next time.